What about Paulie Felder? What about our guy, Paulie Felder, who says, you know what? I'm done with all of this. I'm walking out on my terms. You know, I've seen all these other people. Now, he didn't actually say this, but it has been a theme as of late, seeing all these sort of depressing ends to great MMA careers. And he says, you know what? I feel it in my heart. I've done what I had to do. You know, the ceiling's there. I'm going to go out there and do other things. You know, he had hinted at this in the past, but he came out on Saturday and officially announced the retirement. What did you think of this? As we've seen over the last few months, like I said, a lot of depressing results. Paulie Felder says, you know what? I'm done. I'm good.
You know, my boy Paulie Redstash, he texted me after the show where I said they've offered him the fight against Islam and all these other dudes. And Paulie right away told me, he goes, you know, D, I've been kind of thinking about walking away. That's why I haven't taken the fight against Islam or anybody else. Listen, Paul Felder was never afraid of anyone. Paul Felder will fight anybody. We've seen it on a number of occasions. I mean, he fought RDA on 5 days' notice and lost 30 pounds to make the weight, right? So we know who Paul Felder is. But when you lose that fire to compete, especially when you're a guy like Paul, right? A guy who kind of is a blood and guts warrior. When you lose that desire, that fire to be in there and going through the type of fights that he's been through with Mike Perry and Dan Hooker and all those guys, how do you wrap your mind around the damage that you take if you don't love doing it no more? When it's easy to do when you love it. You go home with the bruises, you go, what? You know what? I'm going to recover and I'm going to go do this again because I love it. But when that's gone, it's gone. And a guy in Paul Felder who has a fantastic broadcast career that's waiting for him. He has acting opportunities. He's got so many opportunities. The UFC is changing in a way that now, as an athlete, you can walk away earlier and still find a lot of opportunities. And Paul Felder is the type of guy that will take full advantage of those things. So good for Paul. He doesn't have to stay out there and ruin the things that he's built, right? Legacy matters, man. And everybody's legacy is on different levels. But to Paul Felder, he values the work that he's done in the octagon, and I believe that he's making the right decision.
Yeah, there is a lesson there. It's always important, especially for fighters whose careers can end very abruptly, whose careers can end in their mid-30s. You know, regular schmoes, our careers don't end in our mid-30s. It's important to have that next thing. And so, as you mentioned, he has a lot of next things, and he's a big part of the UFC broadcast plans as well as other things. But can I ask you, DC, is it easier, in your opinion, for an Alan Jouban, a Paul Felder, tremendous fighters, not taking anything away from them, but not former champions who are trying to, like, chase that dragon again, trying to get back on top and relive the glory years? Is it easier for them, in your opinion, to know when to say when, as opposed to a Jacare, a Junior Dos Santos type of guy, you know, like those older fighters who were once champions at the very top, and, you know, an Anderson Silva, and are trying to get back there when in reality they can never get back there because they're just too old and they have too many, you know, miles on their tires. You get what I'm saying? Because it feels like we've seen this recently with these sort of, you know, contender / mid-tier guy who never got over to the championship level, knowing when to say when, as opposed to these other former champions who seem to stick around a little too long more often than not.
Well, what happens is those glory years, right, that you live as a champion in the UFC, it's like nothing that you're ever going to experience again in your life. So you pine for that. You want to go back to those days, right? Whenever your body and your physical capabilities won't allow it, you know, but the last person to realize that it's over is that champion. That person that wore that title. That person that was at the top of the world. That's the person that's last to understand that it's over. So it's a little more difficult for a Junior Dos Santos, Anderson Silva to walk away, because in your mind, the body stops having the ability to get to those heights, but your mind still tells you that you're the champion, right? When you look in the mirror, you try to believe that you're still that guy when in reality it's over. What makes it easier, though, also for those guys is that they have those second careers, right? They have the broadcasting and being a part of the show, being at the fights, it does help. So when I go to Houston, Ariel, and I'm doing a signing and there are 1,000 people, that's a big deal for a guy that's not part of the fight anymore. When people are still yelling your name for photos and for autographs, that's all a part of that draw to being a person in the spotlight. So those guys still have that. Those other guys don't have it as much, so it's hard to really deal with.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.